Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Today, I'm joined by Lynn Greenberg, retired attorney, advocate, and co-creator of the Creative Cab Company children's book series. Alongside her son, John, Lynn writes inclusive stories that celebrate learning differences like dyslexia and ADHD, helping kids see themselves reflected as capable, creative, and empowered. I'm so excited for you to listen in on this conversation about neurodiversity, superpowers, and why representation in children's books matters so much. I'm so glad to have you here, Lynn. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting to be able to talk to you.
So, tell me what brought you to the idea of writing books about cars.
My youngest son, I have 4 kids, and my youngest son is dyslexic. And back in the day, no one really discussed learning differences. And so, he didn't see himself in books. And when COVID hit and, he was home, he is an art student, pretty hard to do. It's hard to do anything, virtually, but he couldn't do his art as well in college as virtually. So I was reading FaceTime to my grandchildren, some books. And so we kind of kicked around the idea of what would happen if we wrote some children's books and what do kids like and, cars and taxis and things like that. John had been a, real Thomas the Tank Engine. Really, he loved them a lot. So we said, why don't we try? Why don't we try writing about cars? And so we did. And so the first book, Robbie the Dyslexic Taxi and the Airport Adventure, was born. And, since then we've had such wonderful feedback from everybody, from kids who see themselves in books now, and kids who don't know about it who are curious, and parents and therapists and teachers. And it's opened up so many conversations that's how the series, the Creative Cab Company series, was born. And we just had our second book out, um, you know, about ADHD. It's called Susie the ADHD and the Sightseeing Adventure. And we're hoping to write more. So that's where we are. And that's how the whole idea was born.
So, there must have been life before these books, Lynn. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I am a retired attorney. As I said, I have 4 children. The others are much older than John, but I was an attorney and I had some other businesses. I had a cookie business and I, did other things. I volunteered at schools and I did some charity work. And in my legal world, I also advocated for children. And now I have not just my 4 children, but I have 3 in-law children and 3 grandchildren. So I like to think that I'm a woman with very many hats. So that's where I am.
So, before your son was diagnosed with dyslexia, I'm interested to know because that brought probably a whole different world to you guys. So, how did that open your world up a little bit or change your perspectives?
So John is 26, almost 27, and back in the day, people didn't really have frank conversations. There were no podcasts, there was no Facebook with groups. It was very hard to find your people. So I knew John was a little like learning a little differently. As I said, I have 4 children and everyone learns differently, but John wasn't hitting some of the milestones that he should have been. He could tell you every Thomas the Tank Engine's name, but not tell you that Thomas started with the letter T. And so I knew something was up, and his teachers were, even in nursery school, he's a boy, he's slow, and I knew that wasn't right. And so I started asking questions. I talked to my friend who's a pediatrician. I went to the library and I was trying to understand what was going on. And finally, the school just was no help. So we found someone who would test him. Sure enough, he was classic dyslexic and had ADHD. And so that set us down the path of, all right, now we have an answer as to what's going on, but how do we best help John? So I think labels are important when they are correct because it then led us to finding out the best way to help John. And honestly, it gave John a sort of a sense of relief that there was nothing, wrong with him. He knew he was just going to have to learn differently. So it was terrific to have that answer. But then honestly, that set us down the path of how do we best figure this out and help him.
Absolutely. And how old was he when he got his diagnosis?
He was 6, just 6. Mhm.
It's a little bit of an advantage with the fact that you knew pretty young that he had this going on, rather than him, having to really struggle through school before he had some answers. So that's a good thing, right?
It is a good thing, but I think I learned an important lesson, which is if something doesn't feel right and everyone else is telling you you're wrong, if it just doesn't feel right and you know your child, don't listen to the talking heads. You've got to really, really listen to yourself, to your gut, to your child, and find the answer that feels right for you and for your child because people may be well intentioned, but they don't always have the right answer. And so you have to keep pursuing what you think will be the right answer.
Yeah. So, it just makes me think about, uh, raising my children because they both have ADHD as well. And I think about, honestly, I don't know what it's like to raise non-neurodivergent children. And so it sounds to me like John has some neurotypical siblings. So how did that kind of pan out in your family?
Well, honestly, I think if all of us are tested, we all have something. I don't think there's anything is, perfect. Nobody is perfect. We all have something, But certainly when I was a child, nobody tested, no one discussed it. And with my older children, looking back, I think
Absolutely. So do
everyone
you have
has
ADHD as well?
I never got tested, but probably a little bit of it. But, like I said, I was never tested and I'm not, an expert. So I only know what I know. But, all of my kids, just like I think everybody has something, anxiety. Yeah, there's probably a little more ADHD. But for us at the time, we didn't really know what to explore. And when Jonathan was diagnosed, his siblings are much older, but they're very wonderful. We have a wonderful supportive family and it's it's really helped him and I think it's brought everybody even closer because there is a wonderful school that was going to be a possibility. John applied and got in and it's a private school because the public school really couldn't help him and we had a family decision once he got into the school. Do we do it? It's private school, so we were going to all eat a lot of peanut butter and jelly. And, there was going to it's an hour away from our home. What were we going to do? And so everyone really had to come together and sort of understand that I wouldn't be home as much, that John, because I was driving back and forth. And everyone was without a doubt, nope, John has to go. He has to go to this school. It's really important for him to learn and read. And, I think everybody being on the same page, I think it was really wonderful. And it like I said, it really brought everybody closer together.
Awesome.
Thanks.
What a great story.
Thanks.
So now you were telling me before we got on that John's currently working on his graduate degree. So
Yes.
obviously it didn't stop him.
John is a very determined person. And, he had to work hard to learn how to read. And he was so successful. And before he could, really read, he communicated often by his artwork. And so that was a passion of his. And he really enjoyed that and really excelled at that. So he decided to pursue it as a career. And he is getting his MFA at a school in Chicago called the School of Art in Chicago, SAIC, and he's going to be done this year, and we're so proud of him. He's really doing well. We're going out to he's in a show, and we get to go see him next week, so we're very excited for that.
That will be so awesome. I
Thanks.
myself am a true believer that ADHD and neurodiversity and creativity all go hand in hand.
John calls it his superpower, so we totally agree with you. Art is his superpower, and it came from John, from who he is. He calls his artwork his superpower. It's a way he expresses himself. His neurodiversity is his superpower because it's allowed him to become the person that he is and the empathetic and kind and artistic person that he is. So we truly believe that it's not a negative, it's a positive and something to embrace, not to feel bad about.
Is John the only artistic one in the family? You're a writer, obviously. Do you do other types of art?
Not as much, but all of my oldest child, my daughter, is very creative. She knits and crochets and does art projects with my grandchildren, and bakes and does things like that. And there's definitely a lot of different kinds of creativity with all of my children.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our family, we're musical, we're actors, we're writers, we're drawers, painters, the whole gambit, and we are all neurodiverse as they come.
There you go. Everyone has their own superpower.
Absolutely. So, growing up, you said that in this family that you have here, that everybody's got a little bit of something, and there's a stir fry of um, mental health, I guess, or learning differences, or any of those things. Um, I don't know about you, but being that I had kids and my whole family were neurodiverse, I didn't really think that I was living much of a different life than other people. And then I came to
I
find out that, yeah, I kind of am.
well, I think now people talk about it all more. I like I said, when I was younger, certainly nobody discussed anything. Um, and so I didn't have a good understanding. I came to find out in my father's side of the family, there are quite a few kids who are now adults who are dyslexic. And but nobody knew about it. I'm pretty sure, my husband's grandmother was dyslexic, but again, nobody knew about it. And so I think there's, generationally, we've come to a place that is more conversational, but it was definitely not something people spoke about, partly because they didn't know about it, but partly because nobody discussed anything that was negative. And they certainly wouldn't have classified it as a
Yeah.
superpower.
No, and not my kid. That was the era of not my kid. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with my child, and anything that's different is wrong, right?
Right? Which is a shame. That's just absolutely not true, and I think, unfortunately, there's a little bit of that going on now in the world, and it makes me sad because differences, we should embrace them. Differences are what make us all special, and I wish people were more kind about that.
I agree 100%. So, there I just had an ADHD moment again. Oh, I know. So, the other thing about, you were talking about how they didn't talk about it at that time and talk about the ADHD or autism or a lot of the disability areas or differences areas. Um, and especially not for girls, right?
Oh, yeah.
So John, he's a boy, so he had at least a little bit better of a chance of being noticed. But did you say you have a daughter?
I do, but she's my oldest, and there was, you know, right away she spoke early, she excelled at school. So I didn't even, sort of think about that. But part of the reason we wrote about this book, because people don't really discuss um, girls and learning differences as much. And so we wanted to draw attention to the fact that,
I was so happy you
Susie.
picked a girl.
Yeah, and that's why partly why we did, because we thought nobody really there are differences in how boys and girls may exhibit their ADHD. And we wanted to sort of draw attention to that as well. Have that be part of the conversation. So we that's part of the
And
yeah.
when you talk about the learning differences, and I'm wondering because you've done dyslexia, you've done ADHD. What's your next book?
We're discussing and trying to think about there's so many wonderful conversations. We're thinking maybe autism. And because that's again something that people definitely know about, but there's such a huge umbrella of what goes into that. So we were thinking maybe we would try that and talk about that, and the conversation now is how do we best approach that. So it's in the works. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, it's a good choice. I like it. It's a good choice.
Thanks.
I
Thank you.
think what kind of vehicle are we thinking?
Well,
Another taxi?
I don't know. That's what we're trying to decide. But at the Creative Cab Company, there are all kinds of taxis there, and they have not just taxis, but trucks and, tow trucks and, any kind of vehicle. So we're debating and deciding how best to approach the whole story.
So I love the idea of writing these books. I want you to talk to me about why it's so important for kids to be able to read these types of books.
I think it's so important, and John really feels strongly, about embracing all people, all differences. And there really just aren't a lot of conversations, books with kids who have learning differences. And we decided it was really important, and we have come to find we did a book signing, and some young boy came up and gave John a big hug, and he goes, thank you for letting me be in a book. And my sister's like jealous because she's not in a book. And that we didn't want the jealousy part, but we wanted people to be seen. And I went and read the first book, Robbie, to my grandson's school. And in that classroom, there was a conversation of, well, I can read. What do you mean some people can't read? And it opened up conversations with kids who were dyslexic, kids who weren't. And the teacher had a lot of questions because she didn't really know about it, even though she was a great teacher. So it's really opened up wonderful conversations, which is why we wanted to do that.
And what I really appreciate is, and this is by nobody's fault, but I was growing up and as my kids were growing up, an inclusive book would be a book where they included a kid in a wheelchair, right? Or a blind student or a deaf student, but very visible disabilities, very visible differences, as opposed to these neurological differences that you can't see necessarily from the outside. And so bringing those to the forefront is so important because they don't see a kid looking different, but they do act different sometimes and they do different things.
Yes. I think it's been a slow process, but once I think it started honestly with the Autism Speaks, sort of that movement. And I think it started a bigger, broader conversation. It allowed us, to not only speak about autism, but then to speak about other topics. And then you had people coming out like Richard Branson and, you know, high level, high functioning people who have done a lot in this world. And I think it became a conversation that was, allowed to happen. And it's been a slow process, but I certainly have seen quite a change even in during John's, growing up. And I think it's only getting better. I think there are more and more conversations, and I think it's really important to have those, and I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, I am too. I would love to have a world where we just looked at each other's differences as differences and not as a threat.
Oh,
You know?
100%. I am right there with you. It makes me incredibly sad to see people calling differences something other than normal. They are. And to be negative about it does everyone a disservice. So I totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Well, and I tell people, you don't have to have ADHD to have executive function issues because like everybody has some sort of executive function issue. No, I don't think there's anybody who's exempt, right?
I agree
and,
with you.
and so
Man,
it's along that same thing.
we're all different. And that's great. That's what makes us special. I can't do math. Let me tell you, I have, I can't do math very well. My husband's amazing. I have 4 kids, 3 needed math tutors, 1 got his MBA, because he was so good at math. I think everybody is different and we bring something else to our worlds, and thank goodness, because that's, you know, how boring if we were all the same. I don't know. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah. I had a student ask me one time in class, she said, Miss VanStee, am I weird? And I said, "Well, yes. Aren't we all?"
Isn't isn't that great? Yeah. I love that you're
We're all
different. Yeah, I
different.
love who you are.
We and she looked at me and she's like, "Yeah, you're right." But yeah, I love the differences, and I love the fact that that's what you're accentuating in your stories, is that it's great to be different, and those differences can be strengths and superpowers, and, for a kid who just found out that he has something weird called ADHD and he doesn't know what that is, or, dyslexia, he doesn't completely understand it, having a book would be so comforting.
That's what we're hoping. And as I said, that has been the reception we've gotten. And we've gotten such a positive reception. And so it's really been wonderful for us, and, affirming for the reasons we've created the books. And so, we'll keep writing as long as people want to read them. So,
So what do your other kids think of this project?
but they're really excited for us, and they're proud of, the fact that we've been so successful, that John helped me write the books, and his artwork is in all of them. And it's different from the art that he does at school, but they're really proud of it. And my grandchildren help us do our social media. They're, we're on social media as Creative Cab Company, and they love to participate in that. And, it is, been a little bit of a family affair. So we're really we're really proud of it, and they are, you know my kids, I feel really good about the fact that we all applaud each other in all of our endeavors, so everyone's been really
Awesome.
positive about it.
That's
Thanks.
so I have to ask though, as a lawyer, going through life, how do you go about suddenly writing a book? Did you have training on how to write? Were you good in English? How did you go, "Oh, I'm a lawyer, but I'm gonna write a book."
So I was an English major in college, and I did creative writing, and then I was like, all right, well, I don't know if I wanna be a teacher. I'm not sure I'm patient enough, but, what can I do with it? And so it's not creative to be a lawyer, but I definitely had to use my language skills and my ability to write. And so I chose to be a lawyer, and I really liked being a lawyer. But as I had, more children, it became more difficult. I couldn't be everything to everybody. And I found, especially when John was born, that it was taking a strip out of me, to be honest, to try to um, be a good mother and wife and run a home. And so I decided to take a hiatus from being a lawyer, and I was going to go back to it. And then when I decided, when I was driving John back and forth, I kind of decided that as much as I appreciated what I did, I thought that maybe I'd like to try to turn all my legal knowledge into something else. And, I've had other businesses. And quite frankly, now, I certainly have to know different kinds of law to be a book publisher and to write books. So I've taken the knowledge that I had and just used it in different ways.
Well, you've done it in a wonderful way. And believe it or
Thank
not,
you.
we're really close to the end of our time. And I always like to give
Oh,
my guests a chance to get the last word. So I give them one last question. And so my question for you is, if you were to be able to give this crazy mixed up world that we have right now a message, what would that message be?
I think we all need to learn how to, you know, be kind, to embrace each other and our differences, to not look at each other in a negative way because we're different. I think, how we think, who we are, the color of our skin, our religion, all of those things make us a better world. How great that we can all be different. And I think the minute you stop learning and accepting, I really think it's a shame. And I would just love to say to the world, open your minds and your hearts, and we can all learn from each other in a positive way.
Good way to end.
Well, I
So
really
thank
thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much.
Lynn, for coming on and talking to me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really wonderful. I really appreciate being here. I thank you. I'm sorry we've had technical difficulties, but it's been wonderful speaking with you. So thank you.
And with that, I hope our butterflies on the wall who have been listening in will like and subscribe and do all of the fun things. And we'll see you next time.